In June 2026, a scroll that had been sealed shut for almost 2,000 years was read for the very first time. Not by a professor, not by a language expert with decades of training, by an artificial intelligence. The scroll had survived a volcanic eruption that killed thousands of people. It had survived being turned to charcoal. It had survived being buried underground for 19 centuries. And when AI finally cracked it open, what came out was not a poem, not a love letter, not a shopping list. It was a philosophical text that challenged how humans think about power, about knowledge, and about who gets to decide what we are allowed to know. And that is just one scroll. All around the world right now, AI is tearing through ancient languages that no human being has been able to read in thousands of years. And some of what it is finding is deeply, deeply unsettling. Stay with me, because what we are about to go through is real. All of it. And if you want to understand what AI is actually doing to human history, you need to see this video from start to finish. Subscribe now, because we cover exactly this kind of story the moment it breaks. Let us start with that scroll, because that story alone is one of the most extraordinary things to happen in the history of archaeology, and most people still do not know it happened. The year is 79 AD. Mount Vesuvius erupts in southern Italy. Most people know about Pompeii, the city covered in ash, the frozen bodies, the preserved streets. But there was another city that day, Herculaneum, closer to the volcano, wealthier. And it was not buried slowly by ash. Herculaneum was hit by waves of pyroclastic material, scorching flows of gas and rock that cooked the city at hundreds of degrees in an instant. So fast that an entire library was preserved inside a villa, not by ash, but by being turned to charcoal in seconds. The library is now called the Villa of the Papyri. Inside that villa were hundreds of scrolls, all of them fused into black, fragile cylinders. Scientists for centuries tried to open them. Every attempt just crumbled the scrolls to dust. For nearly 2,000 years, those scrolls sat there, full of knowledge, full of words, and completely unreadable. Scholars believed the knowledge inside was lost forever. A few fragments were teased out using technology in the 1990s, but no one could fully read an intact, sealed scroll until a competition changed everything. In March 2023, researchers launched the Vesuvius Challenge, a global competition offering prize money for anyone who could use artificial intelligence and non-destructive imaging to actually read the text inside these sealed, carbonized scrolls. The prize pool was over $1 million. The task sounded almost impossible. The scrolls were not just charred, they were compressed. They were fragile. They were solid black lumps that looked more like rocks than books. There was no visible ink. There was no way to open them without destroying them. The solution was to scan them. Researchers used micro-CT scanning, a super precise X-ray that captures thousands of tiny cross-sectional images. Then AI systems were trained to detect subtle differences in density inside the carbonized material, essentially to see ink that no human eye could detect, buried inside a scroll that looked like charcoal. And then a college student in his early 20s made history. In October 2023, Luke Ferreter, then an undergraduate student, became the first person in nearly 2,000 years to read a word inside one of these scrolls. The word was porphyros, Greek for purple. One word, pulled out of a burned black rock, from something written before the Roman Empire collapsed. That one word earned him $40,000. But it was only the start. Ferreter was quickly joined by two other researchers, Yusef Nader and Julian Schilliger. Working together by early 2024, their AI models revealed 2,000 characters across 4 full columns of text. They won the $700,000 grand prize. 2,000 characters. From a scroll no one had opened in 19 centuries. The text they found was a philosophical work about pleasure and human senses, and it was almost certainly written by a thinker named Philodemus, an Epicurean philosopher who lived at the time of Julius Caesar. But the story did not stop there. It kept going, and it kept getting bigger. In May 2025, researchers claimed the $60,000 first title prize by identifying what appears to be the title of a still-sealed Herculaneum scroll. On Vices, by Philodemus. They had not even opened the scroll yet. They read the title from outside it, through the carbonized layers, using AI and particle accelerator scanning technology. Think about that. A machine reading the cover of a book that has been shut since the Roman Empire. And then in June 2026, everything changed again. On June 25th, 2026, the Vesuvius Challenge announced the complete virtual unwrapping and reading of an entire Herculaneum scroll. Scroll 4, known to researchers as FERC. 1667, without ever touching its pages. It was the first Herculaneum papyrus ever read from beginning to end. The announcement revealed nearly 1.5 meters of text across 20 columns from FERC. 1667. Researchers also recovered more than 70 columns of text from another scroll, PERC. 172, housed at Oxford's Bodleian Library. The findings identified completely new books from the ancient world, including On Vices, Book 1, and On Gods, Book 8, by Philodemus. The recovered Greek text contains terms like horme, meaning impulse, the drive that moves humans and animals to act, and phronesis, a concept related to practical wisdom. The scroll appears to be a philosophical treatise concerned with ethics, arts, and human behavior, possibly even reflecting Stoic thought. This is a Stoic ethics text, sealed inside a lump of charcoal, for 2,000 years. And an AI pulled it out, letter by letter, column by column, using synchrotron X-ray technology and machine learning trained to see chemical shadows inside carbonized material. The Vesuvius Challenge has so far awarded more than $1.8 million in prizes. Around 27 scrolls are now being studied, and experts believe there may be approximately 600 more scrolls still waiting to be decoded underground at Herculaneum. 600 more scrolls, all sealed, all unread, all waiting. Now, the content of these scrolls is remarkable on its own. Philosophy about human impulse, ethics, vice, the gods. But the broader story here is even more important, because what the Vesuvius Challenge proved is that AI can now do something that was considered completely impossible just a few years ago. It can read texts that no human being is even capable of reading with their own eyes. And if it can do that to a charred Roman scroll, what else can it do? The answer is a lot, and some of it is making researchers genuinely uncomfortable. Let us talk about the Indus Valley script, because this is one of the great unsolved mysteries in all of human knowledge, and AI is now closer to cracking it than any previous effort in history. The Indus Valley script is the writing system of the Harappan civilization, the largest Bronze Age civilization in the ancient world, which flourished between approximately 3300 and 1300 BCE across present-day India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. These people built cities with grid-patterned streets, indoor plumbing, standardized weights and measures, and a trade network that stretched all the way to Mesopotamia. They were not primitive. They were sophisticated, advanced. They wrote things down. The Indus Valley script is older than Egyptian hieroglyphs. It is older than Mesopotamian cuneiform. Linguists, archaeologists, cryptographers, computer scientists, and now AI researchers have spent over a century attempting to decode it. None has produced a result the scholarly community has accepted as definitively correct. It remains the last major undeciphered writing system of an advanced ancient civilization. Over 4,000 inscriptions have been found, mostly on small seals, and not a single agreed-upon word has been translated, not one. We do not know what language it was. We do not know if it is a language in the full linguistic sense or something else. We do not even know what direction it was read in, though most evidence suggests right to left. Without bilingual texts or known linguistic descendants, the Indus script has defied interpretation for generations. AI models trained on symbol frequency, patterns, and contextual usage across inscriptions have generated new structural insights about the script, grouping symbols into likely categories and identifying patterns that human researchers missed. In March 2026, a systems theorist sat down with an AI and asked it to analyze the only fully open-access corpus of Indus seal inscriptions. The AI counted signs, calculated their entropy at each position, tested whether the sequences were unique, and checked whether stroke marks behaved like numbers. The results took about 3 hours. 98.3% of all seal inscriptions in the corpus were unique. Not approximately unique, statistically unique. What does that mean? It means almost every inscription carved into those thousands of seals was different from every other one. If this were just decorative symbols or repetitive religious marks, you would expect repetition. The uniqueness suggests individual meaning, specific content, each one saying something particular, something different, like individual labels or records. In January 2025, the Tamil Nadu government announced a $1 million prize for the first person to successfully decipher the Indus script, reflecting how close researchers believe a breakthrough may now be. $1 million for a 4,000-year-old writing system. Because the world now believes AI might actually do what no human has ever managed to do. And if it does, and if what we find inside those seals challenges our understanding of where civilization began, of who was actually sophisticated and advanced before the Greeks and Romans, of what these people believed and recorded about their world, then history as we know it gets rewritten. Now let us talk about a language that does not look like history. It looks like a secret, because it was one. Nushu. If you have never heard of it, that is not an accident. Nushu is the world's only script created and used exclusively by women, originating in Zhangyang County, Hunan Province, China. For centuries, women in this region were not allowed to be educated. They could not read or write Chinese. They were barred from schools and from the written world entirely. So they did something extraordinary. They invented their own script, and they kept it secret from men. 4 centuries ago, Yao women in the southern Chinese province of Hunan created a script called Nushu, meaning women's writing, that was used for centuries by women to communicate with one another in secret. It was passed from mother to daughter, from older sister to younger sister. It was written in embroidery on cloth, in letters between friends, in songs sung at gatherings where men were not present. It was soft, slanted, delicate, and it was completely invisible to the men who controlled the world around it. Nushu is a syllabic script, meaning symbols represent sounds rather than whole words. This difference poses a unique challenge for AI translation, especially given the limited surviving documentation. Researchers from Dartmouth College created a project called Nushu Rescue to tackle the problem of preserving and decoding this endangered language using AI. Leveraging GPT-4 Turbo with no prior exposure to Nushu and only 35 short example pairs, Nushu Rescue achieved nearly 49% translation accuracy on test sentences it had never seen before. Nearly 50% accuracy with just 35 examples. In a language the AI had never encountered. From a script no one outside a small group of rural Chinese women had ever learned to read. That is not just impressive, that is astonishing. And what was inside those hidden messages? Those centuries of secret writing passed between women who were not supposed to have a voice. The themes that emerged were not light or decorative. They were raw, grief, longing, sorrow. The weight of lives lived in silence. The pain of daughters treated as worthless. The bitterness of women who watched their own futures be decided by others. One type of Nushu text, called the Third Day Book, was traditionally given to a bride by her closest friends on the third day after her wedding. It was a farewell letter, written in a script her new family could not read, full of things that could never be said out loud. Nushu is now being revived by younger Chinese women as a symbol of sisterhood and empowerment, with AI helping drive digital archiving and preservation efforts that scholars say are urgently needed before the last living speakers and practitioners are gone. A language born from oppression, kept alive in secret for 400 years, now being resurrected by the same kind of artificial intelligence that is decoding ancient Greek philosophy from burned Roman scrolls. Now let us step back and look at the technology itself. How is AI actually doing this? How does a machine read something that no human can read? It comes down to pattern recognition, but not the way most people think about it. AI does not read the way you do. It does not understand meaning in the way you understand meaning. What it does is analyze relationships. Which symbols appear next to each other, how often certain patterns repeat, where in a line or on a surface certain symbols tend to show up. It is working with mathematical relationships, not meaning. But from mathematical relationships, meaning eventually emerges. The AI systems working on ancient scripts use several different techniques. Language modeling works by training on huge amounts of known text, until the system understands what tends to come after what. Once it has that foundation, it can generate predictions about missing or damaged portions. Character segmentation takes ancient manuscripts where the letters are blurred, faded, or overlapping, and uses AI to cleanly separate each individual character from the noise, isolating it so it can be analyzed properly. Symbol clustering groups similar symbols together based on shape, position, and context, even when the researcher does not know what those symbols mean, allowing patterns to emerge that suggest which ones might be verbs, which might be names, which might be numbers. And then there is the technology used on the Herculaneum scrolls specifically. The scans for the Herculaneum project were acquired using high-resolution phase contrast X-ray microtomography at the European Synchrotron Radiation Facility in Grenoble, France. A synchrotron is essentially a particle accelerator used to produce extremely powerful X-rays. Machine learning models were then trained to detect ink that is almost indistinguishable from the carbonized papyrus material itself. Ink that looks the same as the charged scroll it was written on. And an AI found it anyway, by detecting microscopic differences in texture and density that no human eye would ever catch. It is not just impressive, it redefines what reading means. The machine learning techniques pioneered by the Vesuvius challenge could now be used to study other types of hidden text, such as cartonnage, recycled papyri often used to wrap Egyptian mummies. Mummy wrapping, made from recycled papyrus. Papyrus that might have had text on it before it was reused, text that might be readable now. If you think about how many mummies there are in museums around the world, and if you think about the fact that the wrapping on each of them might contain ancient writing that AI could now decode, the scale of what we might be about to discover becomes almost impossible to process. This brings us to the question that sits underneath all of this. The question that historians and AI researchers are starting to discuss more openly, even if they do not always say it loudly. Why did so many of these languages disappear? Some of them just faded. Languages do that when the people who speak them die out or get absorbed into other cultures. That is natural. That is how history works. But not all of these scripts disappeared naturally. Some of them were pushed out, some of them were erased, and some of the erasing was deliberate. Think about Nushu. It faded when modern schooling arrived in rural China and women were finally given access to standard Chinese education. The secret was no longer necessary because the oppression that created the need for secrecy began to lift, but the script almost vanished completely in the process, along with everything the women who used it had recorded. Think about the ancient texts that were deliberately written over. In many medieval monasteries, old manuscripts were scraped clean and reused. The parchment was too valuable to waste. But the scraping was not always complete. Ghostly impressions of the original text remained in the surface, and AI can now detect those impressions. In 2021, a team used this technique to uncover previously unknown mathematical work by Archimedes, written beneath a 13th century prayer book. A prayer book. Written on top of the greatest mathematician of the ancient world, not because anyone necessarily wanted to hide Archimedes specifically, but because parchment was expensive. Still, the idea that his work was covered over, that centuries passed where no one could read it, that it took a machine to find it again, that says something. It says that knowledge is fragile. It says that what we think we know about history is almost certainly incomplete. And then there are the cases that do not have such innocent explanations. The Indus Valley script remains undeciphered because there is no bilingual document, no equivalent of the Rosetta Stone, no bridge between the ancient language and any language we currently understand. The civilization that created it vanished around 1300 BC. Cities abandoned, trade networks collapsed, population scattered. And the writing system went with it. Was this natural? Was it the result of climate change, drought, flooding, the kind of environmental pressure that has broken civilizations throughout history? Possibly. But we do not know, and that not knowing is itself significant. What were these people recording? What did they think was important enough to stamp into thousands of small clay seals and carry across a trade network that stretched thousands of miles? We do not know. We cannot know yet. But AI is getting closer to telling us. And when it does, the answer might be something we were not expecting. The same is true for the Herculaneum scrolls. Approximately 600 scrolls remain unopened and unread in the Herculaneum collection. Experts believe the main library of the Villa of the Papyri was never fully excavated, and that thousands more scrolls could still be underground. The library that was found was in a side room. The main library, if it existed, might still be buried beneath Herculaneum, untouched, unread, full of philosophy, history, science, literature from 2,000 years ago that no modern human being has ever seen. What is in those scrolls? We know some of the already decoded ones contain works by Philodemus on ethics, on vices, on the gods, on human impulse. Already the expectations about the library's composition are shifting. Firk, 1667, turned out to be Stoic, not Epicurean, which historians noted could rewrite assumptions about how broad the collection actually was. If the library contains works not just from one school of thought, but from multiple competing philosophies, if it contains lost histories, lost science, lost mathematics, then decoding those scrolls will not just be an interesting academic exercise. It will reshape what we thought we knew about the ancient world. The ancient world was not less sophisticated than we assume it was. It was different. And in many ways, they knew things that got lost. The Library of Alexandria is the most famous example. Burned, gone. We talk about it with genuine grief. This idea that an enormous repository of ancient knowledge was destroyed, that we lost things we can never get back. But Herculaneum might be something else, not lost, just sealed, waiting. And now AI has the key. What is terrifying about all of this is not any single thing that has been found. What is terrifying is the scale of what has been hidden, whether intentionally or not, and how close we suddenly are to reading all of it. Because once you can read the Herculaneum scrolls, the same technology works on other carbonized papyri. It works on damaged manuscripts. It works on scripts that were erased and written over. It works on languages we have never been able to understand. And every one of those unlocked texts adds to a picture of human history that is going to look very different from the one we currently have. If AI succeeds in deciphering the Indus script, it could redefine our understanding of the Indus Valley civilization and its cultural legacy, potentially rewriting the history of early human societies. Potentially rewriting history, not updating it at the edges, rewriting it. Because right now, our entire picture of where civilization began, of which cultures were advanced and which were not, of what the ancient world looked like, is based on what we could read. And what we could read was a fraction of what was written. We were working from fragments, incomplete records, the texts that survived by accident or were preserved by specific cultural groups who decided they mattered. Now AI is going after the rest, the texts that did not survive the usual way, the ones sealed in volcanoes, the ones scratched into clay seals, the ones passed in secret from woman to woman in a language no man could read, the ones written over by monks who needed the parchment. And it is reading them, one character at a time, one column at a time, one scroll at a time. The thoughts of the ancient world sealed in darkness for 2 millennia are coming back, one scroll at a time. That is not a metaphor. That is a description of what is literally happening right now in June 2026 in laboratories in Naples and Oxford and Kentucky, where machines trained on modern data are pulling ancient words out of ancient silence. What those words say in their totality, when all the scrolls are read and all the scripts are decoded and all the hidden layers are revealed, we do not yet fully know. But we are finding out, faster than most people realize, and the answer to what was written, what was thought, what was recorded, and what was hidden in those ancient, silent, burned, buried, and secret texts may be something that changes not just how we understand history, but how we understand ourselves. The scrolls are speaking, for the first time in 2,000 years, and we are only just beginning to listen. If this video opened your eyes to something you did not know was happening, hit subscribe right now and turn on notifications. We cover this kind of story the moment it breaks, and there is a lot more coming. The machines are still reading.